Okay, and we're COMP2068, and this is week 3, lesson 3, part 2. And I kind of introduced your assignment number 1 that's due next week. And now we should really talk about how to put all this stuff together. So I'm going to pull up my little PowerPoints. You can certainly follow along. I've kind of put this document up online as well. So if you don't want to stare up here and glaze, you can certainly look at the files in front of you. So it's called interactive fiction, right? That's what this thing is all about. So really, it's a bit old school, this kind of game. If you remember the old days when we played Zork, right? It was kind of like I don't know if you guys ever tried that. It's kind of a command line game that we used to play. Well, nowadays we can do something like this on the web, right? Where we kind of have a choose your own adventure, choose your own death kind of thing, right? Whatever path you take. And why am I doing this thing? Because I want you to understand when we create our own games, what you're effectively doing here is you're making your own levels. Each of your decision nodes is like a level to get by, right? So you're going from one decision to the next. Like you were if you were a player and you were going to defeat the boss monster, you had to, to go through different decisions, almost like a little role-playing game. You can make this as much of a role-playing game as you want, by the way, right? The only thing we need to enable this to be interactive a little bit is this Impress.js API, which we can download and install. Let's take a look at what I mean by that. Right, so the Impress.js API, if I look up Impress.js, I'm going to go to his site, right? Here's his I/O page on GitHub, right, which is a freely hosted page. Again, you can get one of these github.io pages yourself, right? And it says, hey, are you bored with all these slide presentations, right? If I use the arrow keys, it says, do you think that presentations given modern browsers shouldn't copy the limits of classic slide decks? And why would you like to impress your audience with stunning, and so on? And if you notice, it kind of has the same idea that Prezi gives you. The same kind of functionality Prezi gives you, but it does it here on the web. It's purely web-based stuff. And the great thing about this is that once you share it on the web and you create this presentation, right, it's something that you can use for your final presentation here. Because you're going to have to do a final presentation where you use either PowerPoint, Prezi, or maybe even Impress to kind of describe what your game is doing, right? So again, the ability for you to do this thing, I mean, if you look at the whole presentation piece, this is what you can do with the framework, and it's fairly well documented. So again, we went to, if you look down here, I went to fork this thing on GitHub, which is what I asked you to do, right, which I've already done. You can click fork, and this is me, right? If I actually go to the Impress.js repository, on here is how to use it, right? You can use the source loop, is what it's called, right? And it talks about how to use the framework in it's very well documented. So actually the source files they have internal documentation within the source files. I know it's funny. And they have details about what to do, how to put things together for this Impress.js framework, and so on. Why don't we do it together though? Before we move on, I want to kind of build from scratch this thing and how it works. But one step at a time. Let's go back to our little presentation here and go through it as a backdrop. So again, we get some, we can create almost like this cool little functionality if you want to flip pages, as an example, as opposed to kind of a boring web transitions. And by the way, when we create this website, your game website for this one, it's a single page website. So it's one of these single page website ideas that all we're going to do is we're going to mark up your page primarily. You can add your custom styling if you want, or whatever. But at the end of the day, all we're going to be doing here is using the Impress.js framework to move things along. So let's create our document. So I'm going to go back, kind of back over to VMware here, where I'm going to relaunch Visual Studio 2013. So follow me here, guys. So we're going to do this one time. So I'm going to make a new project It's going to be a web project. I'm going to choose ASP.NET Web Application. Follow me here, guys, please, so we do this together. And I'm going to rename this thing COMP2068, and we're going to call it Impress Demo. Right? I'm also going to create a new Git repository for it. And I'm going to choose the empty template and press OK. There's another opportunity for us to do this again, this setting up in Visual Studio here, which I want you to do. Online, on my GitHub site, I'm going to go in here when it allows me to, and I'm going to go to my repositories, and I'm going to create a new one, right? It's going to be called COMP2068, and then Impress Demo. So here's our Impress demo for COMP2068, and I'm going to create my repository. And when I do that, I'm going to copy my link, this URI, which you can do the same if you want, and I'm going to go into my Team Explorer. I'm going to go Changes, and I'm going to do my first commit. So here's my created project structure in Visual Studio. Right, that's what I did. And you know what? From here, I'm going to sync it up with GitHub. Okay, so everything goes well, and it's going to publish my branch to the master, and if everything is good, we're good to go. Let's just wait for this to happen. As you can see, I have super fast speeds here today at Georgia. Okay. While this is doing that, I can continue to work, right? Oh, an error occurred while sending the request. What error, man? What error?
I'm still creating my application.
Oh, yeah? What's the error? That's what I want to know. Could be that I'm not connected, but I doubt it highly. Looks like I have internet access. And let's say I'm going to make sure that this is, I did copy this properly, so I did that right. It shouldn't deny me because I've done this like a million times. If worst case, again, something's wrong, I can always go back here. I can always go back here and continue to push or whatever.
Visual Studio, how do you change which repository you're connected to? It wants me to keep going the same one.
You got to point to it. You do. I got to show you how to do that. So let's just do that again. So that somehow, I'm not sure why. If I go to manage branches, here's there is no published branches right now, right? I've got my unsync commits. I tried to sync it up, but I couldn't, right? I failed, and I can't do it. So let's just curious. I want to just try it again because for whatever reason, I'm just going to refresh here and see if it does anything here. I'm having some really slow speeds going on, and that might have been the problem. But yeah, so I haven't synced up with it. I'm just going to connect. I'm going to connect to my with this doohickey here. Minor technical difficulties. Huh? Oh, not a big deal. Sorry. Big Ziploc bag stuff. All right, so let's try that whole thing again. So the first thing to do for me to try it again is I need to wipe it off my GitHub local files, right? So I created this slot, this website or this project, and I called it Impress Demo. I got to clear that out. That's the first thing.
Where is it?
Well, I just created it locally, right? So I'm going to create a new one. Oops, I'm going to create a new one here, and I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to remove this one, and I'm going to make a new project from the top. I'm going to do it again for you guys so you can see it. A new web ASP.NET application, which I'm going to call COMP2068 Impress Demo. Feels like I'm connected a little better now, but let's just see. In my Solution Explorer, I've got my files. In my Team Explorer, of course. I just killed that. It's one of those days today, guys. Here it is. I'm just going to merge this one together with that one. There we go. There's my Solution Explorer, my Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes. I'm going to create a new commit. Created new VS project, whatever. I'm going to click Commit here. I'm going to go to my unsynced commits. I'm going to go back and make sure I got this right. I'm going to copy it to clipboard. Go back, and that could have been the error, and paste. This is correct now, right? And publish. Now, if I'm good, I haven't done anything wrong here. It's looking like it's not going to work. Oh, yay! I'm good now. All right, so I just have to redo that. And let's just refresh. It could have been just a wrong link. When I refresh, I'm good to go. If you notice, I've got this Impress demo. It says created new VS project, and so on. Okay, that's good. Let's move on from there now. All right, so I need to create my project in the correct way. So I'm going to go to New. I'm going to add new folder, and my new folder is going to be a CSS folder. Let's do this together, guys. I'm going to go right-click, Add New Folder, and it's going to be an Assets folder where I'm going to keep any kind of images, and I'm going to add a couple things in here. If I want to add images or fonts, my custom fonts from my files, all that kind of stuff, this is the way I want you to set this up. And many kind of noises, and again, if you want to add some sounds, you can do that for your game. I'm also going to need to put together a scripts file, scripts folder, so I'm going to go add new folder scripts with capital S to comply with Microsoft stuff. And I'm going to go to add new folder inside the scripts and put a lib folder. Okay, so I've got my basic structure, and now my folder structure, and I'm going to create a new new HTML page. I'm going to call it index, obviously. You can call it whatever you like. And here, I'm going to just remove this so I comply with HTML5. I'm going to go lang is equal to English. And I'm also going to add a couple meta tags like I always do. The first one is going to be character set is equal to UTF-8. And I also want to add a meta tag in here for my viewport. I'm going to actually deal with the viewport here as well. Content, and it's going to be width is equal to device width is what I'm going to add in here. Okay, are you guys with me? So viewport and my character sets here. I'm also in my title. I'm going to put on what we're doing here. So it's going to be COMP2068, and it's going to be an Impress demo, right? I'm also going to put a section together for CSS because this is my CSS section. Down inside the body of my document, I'm going to say, here is my JavaScript section, right? My JavaScript section, my CSS section, and this is where I'm going to drag and drop my stuff, right? Now I don't have CSS, but I'm going to add it in. I'm going to go to CSS. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to go Add, and I'm going to add in a new style sheet, and I'm going to call it App or Game. Game.css is more appropriate. It's empty right now, and I'll leave it that way. Here's game.css, and in my lib folder, right? Or my scripts folder, actually, I'll right-click my scripts folder, and I'll say Add, and I'll say we're going to go with JavaScript right now because I want to try and start with JavaScript with you guys and not TypeScript. If we're going to do anything, it's going to be with JavaScript today. And I'll say it's going to be our new game.js file. So there it is. Right? So I got a game.js file. I've got a game.css file. I got to connect them. I got to connect these two to my index.html. I'm going to drag and drop my game.css so it's underneath my comments, and my game.js is underneath my comments. This is all cool. I'm going to save. And I'm going to go to my Team Explorer, and I'm going to do another commit. So I'm going to go home, changes. I added a bunch of files, right? It says I did all these things. So created basic boilerplate structure. You can, again, put whatever you like, but this is part of my commit history, right? I say yes, and then I go to home, unsync commits, and press sync. And then, of course, it initiates my merge. And when I connect up to the branch, it pulls my current branch, and then it pushes my my stuff up there, so I'm synced up. And when I go back to my site files on GitHub and refresh, then again, away I go. I have all my files, my CSS, my scripts, all that stuff is there. Okay, so 2 seconds, and we're kind of connected. I want to take it back to the presentation, though, because we did all this piece, right? One piece we need to get is this impress.js code, right? We need this piece, right? I can't run impress.js without this code, right? So I need to download it. And again, you can download. You should have already forked the impress.js framework, right? And let's just go there and do that. You can download it from there. So if I go to my downloads and I look at and try and find impress.js, here it is. This is my master that I downloaded already, pre-downloaded for you guys. There's a couple of different files in here. There's a CSS, right? And there's also a JS, right? Well, the JS file I definitely need. I definitely need that piece. So I'm just going to drag and drop it here from my JS folder into my scripts folder in actually the lib subfolder. I'm just going to do one of these. Right? So now it's part of my folder structure. I'm going to pull this impress.js framework stuff, and if you notice, it's a non-minified API, right? I'm going to pull this thing right into my JavaScript section, and it has to be before my game.js. Make sense? Order matters here when it comes to our index.html, right? So we've got our impress.js framework. Now I also have to call the impress.js stuff, just like we saw on our PowerPoint, right? We need to do this. We need to say impress, and then an initialization file, initialization init, this method that comes with the impress class, as an example. Now I could do it here like it says, but what I'd like you to do is use your game.js file to do that. So let's do that with our game.js file. That's not what I wanted. I want to do that with our game.js file. So here's our game.js file. I'm going to double click. And inside of there, in order for me to call a function or whatever, or some kind of line of code inside my game.js file, I should pretty much create a little function that I can call. I'm going to just give a couple spaces here and say function. This is pure JavaScript here. I'm going to call this function init, right? And I'm going to kind of put a code block together. And in order for me to make impress.js available to me, just like last time, I need to create a reference for it. And right now, if you notice, here's my impress.js framework, but I want to call it from within my game.js file. I've got to drag and drop my impress.js file onto my file to create a reference path. This reference path tells me, hey, this is where my impress files live, right? My impress library. And this way I can call the impress framework and get some code hinting here in JavaScript, right? That's the first thing I need to do. I'm just going to go back for a second. Oop. So that's the first thing. And if you notice, I got to put impress and then init. That's really what I got to do here. So let's do that. So I'm going to start typing impress, and there it is. Because I've made a reference path to the impress framework, right? I can start seeing my code hinting. If you don't do this, your code hinting will not come up, and this probably means that you're not connected properly. So here's my impress, right? And if I press dot, I get a bunch of other methods that I can access here, right? With my dot accessor method. And I need the init method, right, that I'm going to call. Well, this is all fine and good. I'm going to call it if my own init method inside my game.js gets called, right? But unfortunately, I haven't created a link to this in any way. And of course, the way to do that is there's a couple ways. I can wait till the document loads. I can create some kind of wrapper that says, you know, when document is ready, document.ready kind of idea, then load up my initialization file, my init document. Or I can just put an onload event listener here, and I can specify the callback, which is going to be called init. Right now, init is referring to my initialization file, which is right here in my game.js file. I need to put this because otherwise it won't do anything. It won't actually access my files until I tell it to. I haven't called that method or that function init, right? So it has to be called. It's almost like calling your main method in Java, right? Now, if you don't like init, so because it's confusing, right? Well, we can rename that. We can go into game.js, right? And I can rename this from init to main, just to give you guys a sense of the same kind of feeling you would have in Java. And that means that here in my onload function, I'm going to change this thing to main as well. My onload is an event listener. It means it fires or it triggers, right, when the body of my document has finished loading, right? So when my body of the document loads, I'm going to call my main function. And in order for me to do that, I got to load a couple of these JavaScript files. Just to make sure that it's going there for now, I'm going to do, before my Impress framework is called, because by the way, it'll error out right now because it doesn't have the piece parts it needs to work properly yet, right? Hold on. I'm going to do a console.log, and I'm going to say game started. All right, just so we know that it's gotten here into this little function, right? Yes, Tom. Where? Oh yes, this piece. This is calling the init method of the Impress framework, not my own init, right? Remember, this method is only coming from this Impress file, this Impress library, right? The one I called init was my own init method that I just created, but I've changed it now to main, just to take away ambiguity. All right. Okay, so this is all fine and good, and if I run this the way it is right now in Chrome, right, I get nothing because there's nothing that I've done. I've got nothing inside the body of my index.html file. But what I really want to do here is check to see if I've got any errors. So I'm going to hit the hamburger here on the right-hand corner of Chrome, go down to More Tools, and go down to JavaScript Console. And it's going to show me an error. It's going to say uncaught type error. Cannot read property of add event listener of no. Because Impress.js is waiting for some piece parts that I haven't put into it yet, right? However, I do know that this thing, my own main method triggered because I get this game started piece. That means I know I've gotten there, right? Somehow. You follow me? So it hasn't done anything. I can't do anything with this framework yet, but only because there's nothing in here. I haven't put all my stuff that I need for the Impress framework to work properly. I'm going to stop debugging here for a second. So we've done this piece. The next piece we need to do is, and I've kind of put together character set is equal to UTF late line. You need to, it says here you can get away without it, but the problem is that some browsers will give you some errors on the console, right? So that's why we put that character set equals UTF-8. It's good from a compatibility perspective. If you notice here, we're not using a canvas for Impress.js. It doesn't use that. We're going to use canvas, the canvas element, for our create.js, but not for Impress.js. Now let's go to this other site. It's meyerweb.com/eric/tools, and then this CSS Reset. It's a good idea whenever you create your own websites, right? Any website, by the way, to get a copy of this of this reset.css file, right? So I'm going to go back over onto the PC side here, and I'm going to fire up Chrome, and I'm going to go into this site. I'm going to copy the files. This is where it's going to be. I've given you this. If you look at the PowerPoint presentation up on Blackboard, it'll give you this link, right? But really, what you want to search for is meyerweb, M-E-Y-E-R web.com /eric/tools/CSS/reset. And what we're going to do here is we're going to get this reset.css file. I'm going to, if it says here, if you look down here, it says you can grab a copy of the file right here. I'm going to right-click, right, and save link as. It's going to pull up reset.css, right? I'm going to just, for now, I'm going to put it inside my my downloads, right? So I'm just going to call reset. It says it already exists, of course, because I've already done this. But that's where I'm going to put it right now, because I've already done this thing, right? So if I go to downloads and I scroll down, I'm going to find a file called reset.css. Here it is, right? And if I bring up my Visual Studio, I want to drag and drop this reset.css into my CSS folder. Again, you could grab the file from online, right? Well, this reset.css, I'm going to grab this thing, and of course I got to include it. But where am I going to include it, and what does this thing do? Well, every browser, whether you put CSS stuff in your index.html page or not, attach it, every browser has its own style set. So every browser, Chrome, Firefox, IE, they all have their own built-in style sheet. We want to normalize this. And there's another really cool file you can also download called normalize.css. It's the same thing. All we're going to do is we're going to zero out all the changes, all the formatting and styling that, that the browser kind of gives us. So we know when we use our CSS, it's our CSS. It's not going to be browser influenced, right? We've normalized or kind of taken away the other cascading style sheet. So in order for me to use that, I got to drag and drop it into my index.html file. So I'm going to do it before my own CSS, right here, right? So here's my reset, and here's my game.css. So it's got to come in before, because remember, from a cascading style sheets perspective, the style sheets happen, you know, the last style sheet or the last change I make is the one that takes, right? From a specificity perspective. So I have a bunch of things, let's say, affecting a certain element. That last one takes hold. So that's why I got to do my reset first. I'm going to save this thing, and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint for a second. So I've got my reset, and I've got all this stuff I want you to put into your document now, so we can start creating our slides, right? But you don't have this. This is on the PowerPoint. You can certainly look on the PowerPoint for this. But the better way to do it is they've given us, when you download the Impress framework, Impress API, I mean, it's part of it. There's no actually parts of this is what we're going to use to build it, right? So let's go there and just go to that file, which I've downloaded already under the Impress.js master, right? There's a CSS, there's a demo CSS file, which I'm going to open up in Sublime. Now you can open it up in whatever text document you want. And if you notice here in Sublime, it gives you examples of how to put things together, right? So if you notice, it already has this normalization stuff happening. So I don't need to pull this stuff. I already have this is part of my own normalizing. What I do need to do is if I want to create a gradient background, then I definitely need this. So I'm going to pull this into my own CSS file. Here's my gradient. I'm going to Control-C. I'm going to go into my game.css. I'm going to double click there. I'm going to replace my body tag with this body tag, which is going to give me this a different gradient. Okay, that's the first thing I'm going to do. And again, I got that from the downloaded Impress.js framework, right, or API. Here it is, Impress.js master. Under the CSS folder, there's an Impress-demo file that I've opened up here in I've opened up in Sublime, but you can open it up in any text editor you want. And I've just dragged or copied this file into my own, or this piece, this CSS snippet. Okay. I don't care about this stuff right now. This isn't important. You can do that yourself. I do need this step. So for the next one I need is this step CSS class. Right, so I need that. So I'm going to copy this one and put that into my file as well. Right, so here's my step class. Right, so I'm going to use this in a second. My step class. Okay, let's take a look. So now I have two. I've bought my body with a gradient in the background, and this step class that modifies my my slides for a second. Okay, that's one. Let's go back to Sublime. I'm still building. I also need this Impress Enabled Step class. I need to get this as well. And I also need this Impress Enabled Step Active. These two things here. So I'm going to grab these as well. So Impress Enabled Step and Impress Enabled Step Active. And you get them again from that file. Okay, if you're following along. I also need this slide class, and I might as well take this slide queue class. But first let's take the slide class. Here's my slide class, because I haven't created my slides yet, but I will. And again, you can take some or all of this stuff. This is why this is a neat little framework, API, I mean. I keep saying framework, but really I mean API. And if I scroll down, I want to also grab this slide queue and slide queue strong. This is just more styling for my slides, which I've created. I'm going to create in a second. Okay, so let's go over that again. I've got my body tag, right? Filled with a gradient. Hold on. Are you good? Okay. I've got my step class, which I've grabbed. I've got my Impress Enabled Step class. I've got in my Impress Enabled Step Active tag here. I've got my slide class. I need to grab this as well. And then I've got my slide queue and my slide queue strong. Okay, those are the ones I've grabbed so far. I don't have anything else right now. I'm just going to scroll down and see if I want anything else from this, from my stuff. And I think right now I'm going to leave it as is. Now, the great thing about this CSS document is it has examples of how to do things like 3D, different kinds of stepping, and so on, right? I'm not going to need anything for now because we're going to do a very basic demo. Okay, so I've got this CSS. That's the first piece I need. Still, though, I can have all the CSS I want. I don't have any elements in my page. I've got to add those in. So that's the next piece we're going to do. Again, one more time for those people who are following along here. Again, I have my body tag, my step, my Impress Enabled Step, my Impress Enabled Step Active, my slide queue, and my slide queue strong. Okay. Back into my index.html, I want to start adding elements here inside my document so I can enable my slides. Let's see what that looks like. So I've done all that stuff, and now I'm here. Now there's a wrapper that I need to put on called Impress. The Impress ID wraps all my code, all my slides together, because Impress.js looks for a div tag with an Impress ID. If it doesn't have it, it's going to give me that funny error in JavaScript, on the JavaScript console. Right now I don't have it, and that's why I'm getting the error, right? So let's go and put that in. So again, it's a div tag. I'm going to use my shorthand here. Number for ID, right? And Impress, and then tab, right? I'm going to give it some space. That's my wrapper. That's going to be my container. This div tag is going to be my container for all my slides. Let me just scroll up here so you can see it. That's the only tag I have in here under my body tag right now. Are you guys with me? I'm going to save that. The next piece is I've got to start defining my slides. And in order for me to do that, if you look at the presentation, I need to define a div tag, another div tag, with an ID of 1 and a class of steps and slide. Step and slide, right? ID of 1 and class step slide. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's easy to do, right? This is my first slide, so to speak. The ID number is the slide number, right? So again, I'm going to get a div tag, an ID of 1, and a class of step and a class of slide. Right? Again, I'm using my shorthand, Zen coding, in order for me to do this quickly. You guys can certainly do the same thing. So this is my container now for my slide. Right? So this, I'm just going to kind of do some comments, will be slide number 1. Right? There is no slide 2 or slide 3 or anything like that. Right now it's just slide 1 when I'm building. Okay? Inside there, I've got to put in my content, right? So I'm going to put a p tag. I'm going to put a p tag with an anchor tag inside of it, right? And I'm going to put another p tag with an anchor tag inside of it. Okay, let's do that. So here's all my paragraph tags. So my first paragraph tag, right, is going to have some text, you know, as an example. Right? And if you notice, just to keep it the same as this other one, it says, hey, there's a time machine over there, flip the switch. So let's do that. There's a time machine over there. I'll say flip the switch with a question mark. It's almost like some, okay, that's the first thing. And then the next one is a couple more paragraph tags, right? Actually, let's do this properly. I'll do the shorthand. A paragraph tag with an A tag inside of it, right? And I need a couple of these, right? So I'm going to do 2. One of them has a 1.
Gives you the whole 8, I think. Gives you the whole
Yeah. Yeah, buddy. That's why it's easy. So I'll do that again for you. Watch, watch, watch. Let's do that again. Just because you're curious, right? P greater than A tab. Right? Number 2. Right? I'll do that again. And then I'll kind of paste it in there, and then it'll be 3. Inside there, I'm going to go flip, right? Flip it, right? And the other one will be wait. Wait for your dad, who is a scientist, to come home. Right? So what you want to do, flip or wait? I'm going to save this now, right? I'm just going to do this one, and I'm going to run it. Let's see what it gives us. All right, we got our slide, right? You should get this. Hey, there's a time machine over there. Flip the switch, flip it, or wait for your dad who is a scientist to come home. Right? Pretty simple. Right now, it doesn't do anything. If I click flip, there is no anchor tag for 1 or 2, so it doesn't go anywhere.
Isn't it 2 or 3?
2 or 3. It doesn't go anywhere. All right, let's add the other slides. I'm just going to minimize this. So that's the first one. What we need to do is do the second and the third one. And here's what they look like. We need step slide. And look, there's this new data-x attribute, right? Whenever you see data-x, anything, data-anything wrapped up in a div tag or some other element in your index.html file, it means that, hey, this is where the JavaScript piece for Impress is going to hit it. This is we're going to target this piece with our JavaScript when I say data-x. Well, if you notice what it does is it says, if I say 1500, what I'm actually doing is saying, take my slide, this next slide, this slide number 2, and put it 1500 pixels to the right. That's where I'm going to position it. Data-x, the x component. I'm going to move the x over by 1500 pixels, right? And then the next slide is data-x negative 1500, which is going to go to the left side. So it's actually going to physically sit outside of our viewable area, 1500 pixels. All right, let's try that. So again, inside there, we have a couple things that are the same. A div class with slide text. And if I go back, right, that's one thing I missed. I didn't put slide text as my div class, right? I didn't do another little wrapper. I just put a bunch of p tags. So let's fix that up before we make the next one. So I need a div class, a div with a class of slide text, right? Slide text, right? And this is going to wrap my p tags up. So because I forgot to do that. I'm going to take this and kind of dump them in here, right? Just to see the difference, I'm going to refresh to see what it looks like, right? Right now my slide text looks funny, right? So I'm going to minimize this again. So this is my div tag. Here's my slide text, and if I've done everything correct, if I go back, right, I should put slide dash text, not slide and text. Those are two different things. That's why I'm getting that weird effect. Put the wrong class in there. That's why it's not working. And if I refresh now, it should give me the right effect. I knew there was something wrong. There. Okay, so this is all the basic stuff that I need for my next slide. So I'm just going to take this slide here and copy it, right? So that's slide number 1. I might as well copy it to make slide number 2, because I'm lazy. And I'm not going to make slide number 3 because slide 2 and 3 are going to be very similar, right? So slide 2 would be if I was to flip it, right? So this is where I flipped it, right? And something's got to happen to me in slide number 2. And if you notice, what I do in slide 2 is say, hey, you went back in time, it was fun, start over, right? So very, very simple. I went back in time. There's a menu, right, that says start over, right? So this class of menu, so a div of the class of menu with an A tag that goes back to the first slide, and then it says start over. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go, you went back in time, it was fun. Right? And my slide is number 2. I got to change my ID for my slide, right? I've also got to add in that data-x, right, is equal to 1500, or else my slide's going to bury itself on top of the other one. I got to put that in there. I don't need this flip anymore, or this, hey, wait, let's just rewrite this one. So again, it's a p tag with an a tag inside of it, right? And then, actually, let me go back. I will Control Z. It's a p tag with an a tag inside of it, an anchor tag inside of it with a class of menu. Okay, so it's actually a div tag, sorry. So a div tag, see, a div tag with a class of menu and an a tag inside of it. So not p, but a div with a class of menu, right, and an a tag inside of it. Okay, and it's going to go back to 1. That's our first slide. If you notice, right, back to 1, and it's going to say start over. All right, so class of menu, and it was a fun. Now you got to start over. If I run this now, just to see my slide here, right? Let's pull this one up. If I go flip it, boom, I go back to here. You went back in time, it was fun. Start over, goes back, right?
Can you flip it again? Click on that. Flip it where it's purple. So when you click, go back there. Is it because it's refreshing?
It's using the Impress framework. What if you want to use like hover effects and make it into a button and all that kind of stuff? That's your own CSS. Yeah. Yes.
I got a huge error, 404 not found.
All right. We'll figure that out when we come back. Let me take that up with you at the break. All right. So I've got slide 2. Let's add slide 3 in there. So here's my slide 2. I want to put my slide 3. Right? And again, I got to change all the numbers. Right? Here's slide 3. And I'm still going to go back to slide 1, except if I leave this at 1500, let's just do that so I show you what it looks like. I'll just change this text here. Right? You went back in time, but you didn't. You chose to go stay with your dad. Your dad came home and he didn't let you travel in. He didn't let you use the time machine. And then maybe we'll put in something like, you got bored, right? Game over. Or start again. We got to start again, right? So let's start again. You got bored. But because I left it at 1500 and I didn't change to a negative 1500, it's going to start over top of it, of the other slide. Let's see how that looks. All right? It looks like this. Both slides are on top of each other, right? That's not what we want, right? What we want is to make this negative 1500, right? So that when we refresh, just going to go back here, and I flip, I go here, and when I go wait, I go here. So now I've got movement left and right. Okay? So I want you to understand the API that we're using before we actually create your own game, because otherwise you're going to be like, Tom, I have no clue how to do this thing, right? Well, that's why we're doing this. If you haven't been able to make this work while I'm going, don't worry, because I'm going to upload my files now, and if you made a mistake, typing error, or if you did something different than me, you can always pull down my my GitHub stuff, which I'm going to do right now. So Team Explorer, I'm going to go to Home, I'm going to go to Changes, I'm going to say added the Impress API, created basic demo, right? So make sure that there's nothing else that I've excluded, and commit. I'm going to go to Home, I'm going to go to Unsync Commits, and I'm going to click Sync. And if all goes well, then you guys should have the files I have in a second. If all goes well. For some reason, GitHub and the whole Georgian network seems to be fairly slow today for some reason. I'll let that do its thing. While it's pulling. So, and while it's doing that, I'll go back to this. So again, the data X attribute tells me where to position the slides, right? Left or right. Now we added a div for the menu, right? So in order for us to create some styling for the menu, which is not included, let's add some CSS like it says here. A div.menu, right? With a bordered top, a padding top, and a text alignment, right? Because I think we need to do that so that our menu looks a little different. And also, if you notice, this got some additional styling here that it suggests. Some styling for the links, right, which we don't have, slide A, and so on. Some styling for the text area, which we can do. We can style pretty much everything. And there's some examples, which we're not going to go over here, but I'm going to leave for you to explore on your own. Some of these CSS styles kind of take me to how mine looks, the dragon, how I kind of styled that up with the look of buttons and so on. The menu, though, it's kind of cool. If you add that in, it kind of creates a border, a little line that separates the menu from the text. and so on, right? So if I do that, let's just do that really quickly. And did it sync? It did sync. I'm going to go into my CSS. And one thing I need to put in there is a div. So I'll say div.menu. And in my menu, again, I want to put a border top, a padding top, and a text align. So here we go. So border top, right? And let's keep it the same, 2 pixel solid black. Right? And a padding top with, I'm thinking 25 pixels, it says. So it gives me some space between one and the other. And the last thing is the text align center. So it's going to be centered. Again, these are all things that Visual Studio can find nicely for you in a nutshell. When I do that and I refresh, if I start my little story again for the time machine, then now when I go flip, I have a bit of space, right? With the menu, start over. I could add additional space here after my paragraph. We went back in time, it was fun. I could add images, because this section can contain images, text, other things like sounds and so on, to add additional kind of neat effects and functionality to your game, right? Again, very basic styling and very, very basic functionality right now. But I wanted you to see it, how it's not that difficult to build, right? So that way you can start doing your own game. Now the PowerPoint presentation gives you some ideas about how to create things like an inventory with drag and drop. So if you want to do an inventory, you can. You can add different things that it suggests here. It also tells you how to use an inventory box, like almost like a little container class for an inventory, and how to, well, this is a bat or some kind of sword. As an example, you can add in, you can find a bat image to do that, and some styling that you can add in for your inventory, how to make your inventory work. So all the styling and stuff for your inventory, if you read the slides, I'm not going to do that here because it's an overkill. I'll let you do that on your own. This is your own kind of, you can look at this, so you can use this to put things together for your game. So the elements to make your game work are here and within the impress.js framework or API. If you read the source file, read the source, Luke, right? Then you can actually go through and see how they do things like 3D and how they do different kinds of effects. You don't have to use it. What I would ask you to do actually is make it look like your own, like I said. Don't just accept the basic styling that comes with the Impress API. Like for example, this gradient background. Make your own gradient background. I made mine blue just to make it a little different, right? Make yours look like what it's supposed to look like. If you don't want to use a gradient background, and if you're doing a role-playing game, make it look like a scene of where the person is. Get a scene of a cave or something like that. You can do all kinds of little funny things to make it interesting for yourself. The more interesting you make it, I'm going to give you more bonus marks. This is an opportunity for you to get additional bonus marks because the functionality marks here for your assignment are very small, right? It's largely a documentation type of assignment, right? Functionality here is minimal. All it is, you're using, wrappers. You're marking up your HTML to create your story. The coding here is minimal, right? So you have an opportunity to make this more interesting, to make it your own story. Please don't give me back the dragon as your story, all right? This would be bad, right? I don't even want a variant of it. I don't want you to say, well, I made my own dragon top. Don't do that, all right?
Dragons.
Yeah, don't make. Mine's called dragons. That's right. Like just like in when you play Scrabble, you add an S on the end, right? And you get some points. You're not going to get any points here if you add an S on the end of my dragon. The dragons, right? Don't do that. Make it your own game. Think about your own story, and that means plotting out a little bit, talking about the initial node that you set up, and where you're going to go from there. After you've got to your story, you're starting off with your story. you know, plot it out, kind of map it out of where you're going to go. So in order for us to do that, some people, you know, need a little bit of a boost to do that, right? And if I ask you next week on Thursday, have you started? Some of you might still say no, right? Because that's the kind of people you are. You're going to start on the last day on Friday and think you're going to get it all done. And then you're going to realize that, holy crap, this external document takes a while to make, right? Don't wait till next Thursday to tell me that you just haven't started yet. That would be very bad for you. You're not going to get full marks. If you don't care about marks, that's fine, right? But if you care about marks, start soon. And then we can look at your stuff next Thursday. I can look at it and go, oh, hey, this looks pretty good, right? And in fact, that's what I'm asking you to do. So next Thursday, I'm going to look at your work. So if you don't have it ready, I can't help you out. I can't give you feedback. I'm going to give you instant feedback to tell you, yeah, no, this isn't good. Or, you know what, this is pretty cool. I like what you're doing here. Or you know what, you need to add this. Or you need to take away this. I can't do that unless you're ready. So please have your stuff ready for next Thursday. Yes?
I'm still confused why I need to add reset CSS.
That's a good question. So why do we need to use this reset CSS? Because if I don't add the reset CSS, then we don't know, there's not a 100% chance or 100% control over the styling of the page. The reset takes away the browser's default styling. Every browser, i.e., like I said, Chrome, whatever, what have you, has its own styling that it adds on top of your styling. So in order for us to take that away, we reset everything to 0, and then we can start styling. And it's a common practice nowadays that we use. We use a normalize, some kind of normalization or reset to take away browser styling before we do our own CSS. That's why. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Can you tell us how to get that reset file?
Yes, I told you how to do it already. If you go to Myers Web, it's actually inside your PowerPoint presentation. If you go right to the top of your PowerPoint presentation, which is on your Blackboard, right? It'll take you right here to this link, meyerweb.com, Eric, Tools, CSS, Reset. And then from there, when you go to that link, right? So I'll say Meyer Web, right? When you go to that link, it's down the page. It says copy the file here. You can drag copy right here. Or, look, it's right here. You can always just copy all this stuff right here, this file, and put it into make your own CSS file from this one, just by copying and pasting if you want. Any other questions? So again, I've outlined assignment number 1 to you. Let's use a couple other tools, you know, for the next 15 minutes or so to show you how to build your story, right? Because I think one of the things we need to do is that as well. But for now, I'm going to stop recording.